Thanks to you at home as well for staying with us this hour on what we thought was going to probably be a very big news day, and which in fact turned out to be a very big news day. This is the kind of news day that's eventually going to have its own Wikipedia page. What you're looking at right here, this footage, this is a Cobra helicopter. It's an attack helicopter. It's made by Bell. It's been around since the 1960s. It has two blades on the rotor. It has a single engine. Again, this is the Cobra attack helicopter. This is another attack helicopter, different kind. This is the Apache. Instead of two blades and a single engine, the Apache has four blades on the rotor, and it has two engines. This one's made by Boeing. It's been around since the 1970s. Here's another one, keeping with the inexplicable American practice of naming all our attack helicopters after Native American tribes. This one's called the Comanche. I don't think they make this one anymore, but at one point it was going to be the next generation attack helicopter. The Cobra has two blades on the rotor. The Apache has four blades. This one has five blades. You can also see from its sort of angular straight lines that it was supposed to be a stealth attack helicopter using stealth technology to evade detection. Boeing started making the Comanche in the 1990s, but I think they do not make them anymore. I also don't know if it is all of our attack helicopters, but lots of the different kinds of attack helicopters that we have or that we have had as a country, the Cobra, the Apache, the Comanche, also the Viper, the Kiowa, the Black Hawk, all the helicopters that we use in military operations, and even some of them that we don't use anymore, they are all capable of firing this specific thing. This is about 5 feet long. Its diameter is about 7 inches. It weighs about 100 pounds. This has actually gone through a bunch of different variations since it was first launched in 1978, but it always stays roughly the same size and shape, so it can be fitted as a missile onto tons of different aircraft over time. Boeing's history page on this particular exploding projectile explains how it got its name. It turns out it's an acronym. It's an acronym for Helicopter Launched Fire and Forget Missile. So the acronym is Hellfire. Helicopter launched because it was designed initially to be fired from helicopters, and fire and forget because it is a guided missile for which you do all the targeting before you pull the trigger. So it takes, careful targeting and aiming, I guess, for you to program where it's going to go. But that once you have done that work ahead of time, you pull the trigger, you fire, and then you forget it. It goes to where you programmed it to go. Helicopter launched fire and forget. Hellfire. If you are going to be killed by a Hellfire missile, does it matter to you if that missile is fired from one of these or from one of these instead? What is novel about drones is not that U.S. forces can kill people from the air using targeted so-called precision-guided missiles. U.S. forces have been killing people from the air for as long as we have had the capacity to put armed things in the air. What is novel about what our government is doing now in our day is not necessarily the technology. Yes, we are using remote piloted aircraft versus traditionally piloted aircraft to launch these same missiles. But the type of aircraft that is the delivery system for the Hellfire missile is not the new moral, strategic, legal thing that we are finding ourselves newly responsible for grappling with as citizens. It is not the technology by which U.S. forces are killing people which is new in an important way. It's not the technology that's new. It is the circumstances. It is the circumstances of killing people away from where a war is being fought. If the U.S. was using a mix of helicopters and drones to fire Hellfire missiles at insurgents who were fighting with U.S. troops in Afghanistan right now, nobody would have a different ethical concern or a different strategic concern about the missiles that were fired from the drones versus the missiles fired from the helicopters, right? Or even from a piloted fixed-wing aircraft. It doesn't matter where it comes from, the missile's the same. The reason drones are a policy concern, an ethical concern, a strategic concern, is because of how we use them. And we use them to kill people in countries where we are not at war. The reason we were able to have the riveting hearings that we had today in Washington is because this concern has come up in another era as well. This concern of killing people away from where we are at war. It's not just a drone thing. Today's confirmation hearing for John Brennan, President Obama's nominee to head the CIA. It was held in the Intelligence Committee in the Senate, right? Well, specifically, it's called the U.S. Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. This committee was not created until 1976. It was created specifically in response to the recommendations of the Church Committee. The Church Committee was a special Senate investigation led by Idaho Senator Frank Church. It was formed in 1975. Their work took 9 months and 150 staffers. They produced a 2-foot thick report in May 1976 that said, among other things, that we need Congress to oversee intelligence in this country. The way we are overseeing it now is not working. And you know why we can tell that oversight is not working? Because the CIA keeps killing people or trying to kill people in other countries that we are not at war with. The CIA at the time had taken it upon itself. It wasn't clear if they were acting alone or at various presidents' direction, but they had taken on the job of assassinations in foreign countries, assassinations and attempted assassinations. And the Senate said that was not cool. This is from the Church report. The evidence establishes that the United States was implicated in several assassination plots. The committee believes that short of war, assassination is incompatible with American principles, international order, and morality. It should be rejected as a tool of foreign policy. The Church Committee report came out, said that. Gerald Ford issued an executive order banning assassinations. The select committees on intelligence were formed in the House and the Senate to exert oversight over the CIA, since the Armed Services Committees, who had been supposedly overseeing them, had fallen down on the job. Actually, they'd never seemed all that interested in that part of the job in the first place. And that is how we got to a place where these senators today could question this CIA director nominee under the expectation that he has to answer to them. And they need to be apprised of what the CIA is doing every step of the way. And targeted killing by the CIA is not just something they're allowed to do quietly on their own or in private with the White House without at least having to explain.
Every American has the right to know when their government believes it's allowed to kill them. And ensuring that the Congress has the documents and information it needs to conduct robust oversight is central to our democracy. In fact, the committee was actually created in large part in response to lax oversight of programs that involve targeted killings.
Some of the most contentious back and forth today was about whether the CIA is killing people now outside of places that we are at war, because it is U.S. policy just to shoot on sight all over the world, or whether the CIA really is trying to capture people and it's just not working out that they can ever successfully do that.
Your view seems to be that even if we could save American lives by detaining more terrorists using only traditional techniques, it would be better to kill them with a drone or let them go free rather than detain them. Can you explain the logic in that argument?
Well, I respectfully disagree, Senator. I never believe it's better to kill a terrorist than to detain him. We want to detain as many terrorists as possible so we can elicit the intelligence from them in an appropriate manner so that we can disrupt follow-on terrorist attacks. So I'm a strong proponent of doing everything possible short of killing terrorists, bringing them to justice and getting that intelligence from them.
How many high-value targets have been captured during your service with the administration?
There have been a number of individuals who have been captured, arrested, detained, interrogated, debriefed, and put away by our partners overseas, which is we have given them the capacity now, we have provided them the intelligence. And unlike in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, when a lot of these countries were both unwilling and unable to do it, we have given them that opportunity. And so that's where we're working with our partners.
How many high-value targets have been arrested and detained, interrogated by the United States during your 4 years with the administration?
I'll be happy to get that information to you, Senator, in terms of those high-value targets that have been captured with U.S. intelligence support.
I submit to you the answer to that is one, and it's Warsame, who was put on a ship for 60 days and interrogated. Thank you.
One high-value target captured, and, of course, lots killed. If the CIA does make public that there have been more than just that one guy captured that Senator Saxby-Chambliss mentioned there, we will let you know. But in the meantime, that's kind of a hell of a ratio, right, in terms of killed versus captured, 4,700 to 1. So the idea is that first you're trying to capture people, but the rate at which you do that is 1/4700th of a time. In recent days, though, there has been intense focus on whether secret targeted killing by our militarized CIA is also a program that is allowed to target people who have U.S. citizenship. On Monday, NBC News' Michael Isikoff broke the news on this show that he had unearthed a 16-page white paper spelling out some of the legal reasoning behind why our government thinks it is okay to target Americans specifically for killing. That was Monday night. Then last night, the administration announced that the Justice Department classified memo that was the basis of that white paper, the actual legal advice to the president from his lawyers, that would be released to the Intelligence Committee. They've been asking for it forever. They were finally going to release it. It seemed like the pressure and the attention ahead of this confirmation hearing today had finally brought about some real momentum toward transparency, that we would at least let the Senate committee in charge of overseeing this part of our government finally oversee this part of our government. That's what it seemed like. And then this happened.
So it was encouraging last night when the president called and indicated that effective immediately, he would release the documents necessary for senators to understand the full legal analysis of the president's authority to conduct the targeted killing of an American. What the president said is a good first step towards ensuring the openness and accountability that's important. Since last night, however, I have become concerned that the Department of Justice is not following through with the president's commitment just yet. 11 United States senators asked to see any and all legal opinions, but when I went to read the opinions this morning, it is not clear that that is what was provided.
They didn't get it? The Justice Department didn't hand over what the committee asked for, that we all reported last night the committee was going to get this morning because the president had okayed it? They're still holding out? Joining us now is Oregon Democratic Senator Ron Wyden, who has repeatedly asked the Obama administration about our drone policy. Senator Wyden, it's good to see you. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me again.
Did you not, in fact, get what you had asked the president to give you and that you thought you would be getting this morning based on your conversation with the president last night?
Rachel, it's not clear. The fact is, and I went in first thing this morning, I was able to read some information that was helpful. I'm just not convinced yet that it is the full legal analysis that we need to do vigorous oversight. What today was really about is, of course, it was a nomination hearing for John Brennan, but it ultimately was a question of upholding our system of checks and balances in government. And I think that system is out of whack these days, and we've got to do some more for transparency and accountability and getting those checks and balances back.
In terms of this specific program that you've been asking about the legal advice for, specifically targeting Americans, at least specifically targeting one American who we know was killed, Anwar al-Awlaki, who's a prominent member of al-Qaeda who was killed in Yemen in 2011, are you asking about it specifically because you believe that action might have been illegal, or the program that does this might be an illegal program, or are you withholding judgment about its legality? You just believe that they should have to disclose more of their legal reasoning?
I believe to keep that system of checks and balances, the Congress has got to do vigorous oversight. That's what the charge, Rachel, is to the Intelligence Committee. It calls for vigilant oversight, and we can't do that if we're being kept in the dark on fundamental matters like the legal analysis for these targeted killings. And I think, as you indicated on the clip I heard, this is something that Americans have a right to know. They have a right to know when their government believes it's allowed to kill them. And I think it's time, and one of the things that was encouraging about the president's call last night is to have a national discussion about how we can shore up our system of checks and balances and bring the public into it.
In terms of I guess in terms of your overall efforts to try to pry more information out of the administration on this in order to do oversight, as you're saying, when you have seen information that they have released, even though they initially didn't want to release it, when you finally get that information, do you feel like, oh, I see why they didn't want to release it. I see how a leak of this information might be operationally dangerous or might compromise something that we legitimately should keep secret? Or when you see that information, do you think, you know what, they shouldn't be keeping as much secret as they are?
What I'd say by way of summarizing is I think what I've seen is a step in the right direction. But I'm not convinced that I've seen everything, and in fact, if there is legal analysis out there that is central to how the law is being officially interpreted, we need to see that. You and I have talked in the past about something I call secret law. You know, the law is supposed to be public today. It's different than protecting sources and methods. The law is the official interpretation of the government. It ought to be public, and too often the interpretation has been kept secret, and that's what's wrong.
Do you think, though, in terms of what the president has been reluctant to release to you on the Intelligence Committee, do you think that he has a case to make? Do you see his side of the argument that it might be dangerous to release this information even just to the Senate? Is there an argument to be made on that side?
The president, of course, is the commander-in-chief, and the Constitution vests in the president these enormous powers, but they are not unchecked. There are limits, and that's what the president and I talked about on the phone. He has some ideas that I think are worth talking about in terms of this national conversation about how to strike a strong balance, a strong set of checks and balances in a very different era. This is a time when the lines are blurring between the military and intelligence. Technology has, of course, changed so dramatically. I think it's time to walk through how to come up with a modern system of checks and balances. That's what I call upholding the Constitution.
Senator Wyden, you asked a question in writing to John Brennan ahead of this hearing that quite literally has kept me awake at night. It has caused me insomnia thinking about it because of the blunt terms in which you put it and because I hadn't thought about it before. You asked, should an American who is targeted for killing by our government have the opportunity to surrender? And you asked John Brennan that today. He responded that any American who is a member of al-Qaeda should know that we are with al-Qaeda, and anybody who's in al-Qaeda can surrender at any time and thereby eliminate their risk of being killed by the United States. Were you satisfied with that answer?
I wasn't, and here's what's at stake. There are certainly instances where an American takes up arms against the United States, where I think it's important in order to protect the country to use lethal force. But I can tell you, the government makes mistakes, and sometimes the intelligence is flawed, and sometimes they get the wrong person. And the reason I asked that question is I think those kinds of issues ought to be part of this debate and ought to be part of a system of checks and balances.
Oregon Democratic Senator Ron Wyden, I know it's been a very, very long and taxing day for you. Thank you for your time tonight, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. All right.